By age 30, he'd won 60 consecutive duels to the death by eliminating what destroys most warriors. The thing he killed wasn't weakness. It was what people call their greatest strength, their emotions. Musashi discovered that emotions aren't what make you human. They're what make you predictable. And predictable warriors die young. Most people worship their emotions. They think passion makes them strong, that anger gives them power, that fear keeps them safe. They're wrong. Emotions are weapons your enemies use against you. Musashi learned this the hard way. In his early duels, he nearly died, not because his opponents were more skilled, but because his emotions made him stupid. Let me show you what emotional slavery looks like today. Meet Kenji. Smart guy, good intentions, completely controlled by his feelings. Monday morning, his boss criticizes his project. Kenji feels disrespected, spends the day angry, making careless mistakes. Tuesday, he sees a coworker get promoted. Jealousy hits, can't focus, productivity crashes. Wednesday, market volatility spooks him. Fear takes over, sells his investments at a loss. Thursday, argument with his girlfriend. Hurt feelings lead to 3 days of silent treatment. Friday, feels overwhelmed by the week. Emotional eating, skips the gym, stays up too late scrolling social media. Sound familiar? Kenji thinks he's living authentically. He's actually being controlled by chemical reactions in his brain. Every emotion is a puppet string someone else can pull. His boss controls his anger. His coworkers control his jealousy. The market controls his fear. His girlfriend controls his happiness. Kenji isn't the puppet master. He's the puppet. The brutal truth? You're probably no different. Track your decisions for 1 week. Write down every choice you make and the emotion behind it. Career decisions driven by fear of failure. Relationship choices driven by need for approval. Financial decisions driven by greed or panic. Health decisions driven by comfort seeking or shame avoidance. You'll discover something terrifying. Maybe 80% of your choices come from emotional reactions, not strategic thinking. This is exactly what young Musashi discovered about himself. At 16, he fought his first official duel against a seasoned warrior named Arima Kihei. Musashi was skilled, but when Kihei taunted him about his youth and inexperience, rage flooded his system. Heart pounding, vision narrowing, technique forgotten. He won that duel through pure luck and superior reach. But afterward, analyzing the fight, Musashi realized something that changed everything. His emotions had nearly killed him. While he was busy being angry, he'd left himself open 3 times. Any competent opponent would have finished him. That night, Musashi wrote in his journal what would become the foundation of his legendary discipline. The enemy's greatest weapon is not his sword, it is my attachment to my own feelings. He began studying not just swordsmanship, but the systematic elimination of emotional interference. Because here's what most people never realize. Emotions don't make you more effective. They make you less effective at everything they're supposed to help with. Think you need anger to fight hard? Musashi's most devastating victories came when he felt nothing. Think you need fear to stay safe? Musashi walked into mortal danger with complete calm because fear clouds judgment. Think you need passion to achieve great things? Musashi's greatest accomplishments happened after he'd killed his attachment to achieving them. In ancient Japan, there was a term for warriors who let emotions control their actions. They called them already dead, not because they would die in battle, but because they had no control over their own lives. Their enemies could manipulate them with insults, distractions, false hopes, manufactured fears. A warrior controlled by emotions was a warrior controlled by everyone except himself. Musashi refused this fate. He developed a systematic method to identify every emotional trigger, every attachment, every feeling that could be weaponized against him. Then he killed them, one by one, methodically, completely, not suppressed, not managed, eliminated. He called this process becoming like the void, empty of everything that could be used against him, full of everything that made him unstoppable. The samurai had a saying, "The sword that cuts deepest makes no sound." Musashi became that sword, silent, emotionless, deadly. While his opponents raged, feared, hoped, and despaired, Musashi simply acted. Perfect clarity, perfect timing, perfect execution. By the time his enemies realized they were fighting someone who felt nothing, it was too late. But knowing that emotions control you is just the beginning. The real question is, how do you kill something that feels like it is you? How do you eliminate the very reactions that your brain tells you define your humanity? Musashi discovered the answer through a three-stage process that transforms emotional slaves into strategic masters. The first stage nearly broke him. The second stage isolated him from everyone he'd ever known. The third stage made him something his enemies couldn't understand or predict. Most people will never attempt this transformation because they're terrified of what they might become without their emotions. They should be more terrified of what they'll never become with them. Musashi's method for killing emotions wasn't meditation or positive thinking. It was systematic execution. Three stages that progressively eliminate every emotional weakness until nothing remains but pure strategic action. Most people fail at stage one because they're trying to manage their emotions instead of destroying them. Kenji made this exact mistake. After tracking his decisions for a week, Kenji was horrified. 83% emotional reactions, 17% logical thinking. His immediate response? I need better emotional management techniques. Wrong. You can't manage what controls you. You can only eliminate it. Stage 1. Emotional awareness death. Musashi called this killing the observer. Most people think self-awareness means noticing your emotions. Musashi knew that noticing emotions still leaves you under their influence. True awareness means watching emotions like external weather patterns, completely separate from who you are. Kenji started with the standard approach. When anger arose, he'd think, I'm feeling angry. This changed nothing. He was still identified with the emotion, just watching himself be controlled by it. Musashi's technique goes deeper. When anger arises, you think, there is anger in the vicinity. Not your anger, just anger. Present in the space around you like a storm cloud. This subtle shift creates enormous distance. The emotion becomes an object you observe, not an experience you undergo. Musashi practiced this during increasingly dangerous training situations, facing multiple opponents with real weapons, financial ruin, social humiliation. Every emotion that arose was noted as external weather. Fear is present, rage is nearby, sadness is passing through. Kenji implemented this immediately. Monday, his boss criticized his work. Instead of I'm angry, he noted anger is in this room. The emotion lost 50% of its power instantly. By week 2, he was cataloging emotions like a scientist studying specimens. Anxiety is appearing. Duration, 3 minutes. Intensity, 7 out of 10. Influence on decision-making, minimal. The breakthrough happened in week 3. Kenji realized he'd been afraid of losing emotions because he thought they were him. But watching them come and go, like weather patterns, revealed the truth. Emotions are temporary visitors. You are the permanent resident. The visitor doesn't define the house. But awareness alone wasn't enough. Kenji still felt attached to outcomes, still cared what people thought, still needed comfort and security. These attachments were deeper roots feeding the emotional tree, which brought him to stage 2. Stage 2, attachment severing. After his most famous victory against Sasaki Kojiro, Musashi did something his enemies couldn't understand. He disappeared for 2 years into a cave, not celebrating, not capitalizing on his fame, deliberately severing his attachment to victory itself. This is what separates Musashi from every other warrior in history. He won 60 consecutive duels not because he loved winning, but because he'd killed his attachment to both winning and losing. His opponents fought to avoid death. Musashi fought from a place beyond caring about death. This made him invincible. Kenji's attachments were more subtle but equally controlling. Attachment to his reputation at work, attachment to his girlfriend's approval, attachment to financial security, attachment to being comfortable. Each attachment was a leash someone else could pull. Musashi taught that attachments create predictable behaviors. If you're attached to money, you'll make fear-based decisions when finances are threatened. If you're attached to approval, you'll compromise your principles to maintain relationships. If you're attached to comfort, you'll avoid necessary risks. Every attachment makes you controllable. The severing process requires deliberate discomfort. Musashi would train in freezing cold, blazing heat, while hungry, while exhausted. Not to build physical toughness, but to kill his attachment to physical comfort. He'd meditate on losing everything he valued until the thought of loss produced no emotional reaction. Kenji started small, deliberately chose uncomfortable situations, spoke his mind at work despite potential disapproval, invested money despite market uncertainty, spent time alone despite social discomfort. Each action severed another attachment thread. The dangerous phase hit in month 2. Kenji felt empty, disconnected, questioning everything. This is where most people quit and run back to their emotional attachments.
But Musashi knew this emptiness was necessary. You can't fill a cup that's already full. To become something new, you must first become nothing. Kenji pushed through the void. Gradually, something incredible emerged. Decisions became effortless because they weren't contaminated by emotional noise. Conversations became more honest because he wasn't attached to specific outcomes. Work became more effective because he wasn't protecting his ego. Relationships improved because he wasn't needy for validation. But even this wasn't the final stage. The deepest attachment remained. Stage 3. Identity reconstruction. The ultimate attachment isn't to external things. It's to your identity as someone who has attachments. Your ego's need to be special, to matter, to be recognized. This is what Musashi called the final enemy, the one that destroyed more warriors than any external opponent. At his 60th victory, when admirers called him the greatest swordsman alive, Musashi said something that revealed his ultimate mastery. "I have learned nothing." Not false modesty, strategic ego destruction. The moment you believe you're special, you become predictable again. Kenji faced his own identity attachment. He'd become proud of his emotional control, superior to his emotional colleagues, attached to being the guy who didn't let feelings control him. This pride was just another emotion in disguise. Musashi's solution was radical. He deliberately engaged in activities where he had no skill. Poetry, painting, tea ceremony, activities where his sword expertise meant nothing. He forced himself to be a beginner again, to fail, to look foolish. This killed his attachment to being the master. Kenji followed the same path, took up activities where his professional success was irrelevant. Rock climbing, learning languages, cooking. Situations where he was awkward, uncertain, ordinary. Each experience chipped away at his need to be the composed, emotionally controlled person. The result? Complete strategic freedom. When you're not attached to being anyone in particular, you can become exactly what each situation requires. Aggressive, when aggression serves the goal. Gentle, when gentleness works better. Confident, when confidence helps. Humble, when humility opens doors. By month 6, Kenji was unrecognizable, not because he'd become cold or robotic, but because he'd become fluid. Responses perfectly matched circumstances instead of being filtered through emotional reactivity. His colleagues couldn't manipulate him because there was nothing to grab onto. His girlfriend was more attracted to him because he wasn't needy. His boss respected him because he couldn't be intimidated or flattered. But here's where Kenji discovered something that even shocked him. Killing emotions didn't make him less effective at the things emotions are supposed to help him with. It made him infinitely more effective. Fear was supposed to keep him safe. Without fear, he made better risk assessments based on actual data instead of imagined threats. Anger was supposed to help him fight injustice. Without anger, he addressed problems more strategically and persistently. Love was supposed to help him connect with people. Without needy attachment, his relationships became deeper and more authentic. The transformation was complete, but one final test remained. The test that would prove whether Kenji had truly killed his emotions or just buried them temporarily. The test that separated the good from the unstoppable. 6 months after starting his transformation, Kenji faced the ultimate test. His company was acquired, his position eliminated, his girlfriend left him for someone more emotionally available. His investments crashed in a market correction. Everything he'd built gone in 2 weeks. The old Kenji would have been destroyed. Rage at the injustice, fear about the future, despair about starting over. But as Kenji sat in his empty apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of his former life, he felt something extraordinary. Nothing. Complete calm. Perfect clarity. This is the final test of emotional death. When everything falls apart, do you feel devastated or do you feel free? Kenji felt free. Free to rebuild exactly as he chose. Free from the opinions of people who no longer mattered. Free from attachments that had been anchoring him to mediocrity. For the first time in his life, he understood what Musashi meant when he wrote, "Accept everything just as it is." Not passive resignation, strategic acceptance that eliminates emotional resistance to reality.
Emotions are not who you are. They're weather patterns passing through the sky of consciousness. You are the sky, not the weather. When you identify with the weather, you become unstable, unpredictable, controllable. When you identify with the sky, you become unshakable. Your emotions are your enemy's most reliable weapon. Every trigger they can pull, every attachment they can threaten, every fear they can activate gives them control over your choices. Kill the emotions, and you become uncontrollable. The final challenge. Most people will read this and think, but I don't want to become emotionless. You're missing the point. You're not becoming emotionless. You're becoming strategically superior to your emotions. You're killing their control over you, not their existence within you. The question isn't whether this path is pleasant or comfortable. The question is whether you want to remain a puppet or become the puppet master. Whether you want to stay predictable or become unstoppable. Whether you want to keep reacting to life or start creating it. Musashi walked away from his 60th consecutive victory feeling nothing. No pride in his achievement, no satisfaction from his dominance, no attachment to his legendary status. Just perfect clarity about what came next. That's exactly what made him unstoppable. Not the absence of emotion, but the presence of something far more powerful. Complete strategic freedom. Your emotions are waiting to be killed. The only question is whether you're brave enough to become what emerges from their ashes.